Something
Yeah,
this has been a while since I read this book, and when I read books, I don't necessarily retain the information.
sure.
I just remember like what did I take away most from this book, and then I like take actions moving forward.
Okay.
But I do recall there being a point where he's talking about dating, and there's like a so say the computer system or the algorithm inside of you say I go on a date with Jane, and then I went on a date with Lisa.
Yeah.
I might be more physically attracted to Jane, but the algorithm is telling me that based on all these other things I know about you, Lisa is the better fit for you. So then it's like there's no action. It's like all an algorithm.
The key I think to that thought is okay. So I remember exactly this
Yeah,
section.
so it's in
actually.
that book. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not
So
thinking it's in something else.
the way he'll explain that is you're right. Okay. So the first part is Jane, Lisa. The question is who do I go to, right?
Yeah.
And if you were subject to the whims of yourself, right, you would say, oh, Jane is more attractive, so I pick Jane.
Yeah.
What if you could ask Google or your assistant Alexa, hey, who should I pick? Well, I've been gathering all this information about you. I like read your emails, I read your texts. I noticed that your heart rate like skips a beat when you talk to Lisa. I noticed that when you come home, the tone in your voice is just a little bit higher and happier.
Yeah.
You're whistling sometimes when you come from a date from Lisa. Versus with Jane, you sound a little bit jaded. I know that from your water intake that I collect through your biometric this thing that okay, you're just healthier. I think when you're with Lisa.
Yeah.
And I know that you think that you are more physically attracted to Jane, but I also know that on average, all humans, it's like 15% is the total weight that is assigned to actual physical attraction.
Yeah.
So I don't think it will be that good of an idea for you. It's not you making this algorithmic decision, right? It's Google, just
Yeah.
based off of all of it, all of the
Google
information
or
that it
whatever,
could- whatever. Yeah. Whatever.
yeah.
Principle. What is the principle here, right? Some algorithm given enough info is just going to be better at giving you that advice. And so he describes these things in three ways, right? So first, let me see if I remember the words. The first is the oracle, right? Which is this.
Mm-hmm.
I ask the oracle for advice. The three faiths will tell me, oh, this is the path that you should go on. And I'm like, you know what? That's a good idea. The oracles used to be based in scripture. Then they used to be based on laws, right? And what collective humans have decided. And now it's just data. Okay, so the first step of this is the oracle. We are here. It's a very infant stage of this algorithm. So the next one is the agent, right? Where I actually think of this as think like Tony Stark. What's his? Yeah, right.
Yeah. The thing.
Not Baxter. The guy who becomes Vision, right? That guy. So that he makes half of Tony's decisions for him because he's like sure, maybe take out Tony out of that equation, but that thing is, if you had a CEO of a company that had that thing with it, it's totally capable of just making half your decisions for you, right? And you would actually defer a lot of the decision making to that and retain very little will. So one is I seek out advice and I receive it and then act on it. The second stage is there are a set of things that this is just going to decide automatically for me as part of like just because I know that it's better. But you still kind of retain like final ownership of the final decision. I think the third stage, I forget the word that he uses. It's oracle, agent, and then it's just a replacement. And I can try to find the section here.
And this is not just dating. It's like, hey, based on your metrics right now, instead of watching TV, you should play saxophone right now. Well, you should do this or that to get your body to do this.
Right. And okay, so I think he'll open this entire section with like, okay, so what's the problem with you making the decision, right, about this? Right now in this humanist religion that we have, we trust ourselves to do a lot of this decision making. We say that when I make a New Year resolution to go to the gym every day, whatever it may be, I'm doing it because it's in my best interest. But a lot of this, like, I'm doing this because it's in my best interest. Okay, if you actually look at the brain and like and we know surprisingly little about it, but we also know a surprisingly decent amount as well.
Right.
And we know that there are these two parts of it in the sense that there's this narrating self, right? That you tell yourself that this is happening, and you kind of provide a rationale for all the actions that you do. And there's this experiencing self that just that can't speak, but it feels everything, right? And your brain constantly tries to wrap a story around why your experiencing self is experiencing that. So the problem with this humanist perception of life, right, humanist religion, is that we trust our narrating selves, but sometimes ignore the experiencing self.
Yeah.
So who's to say that which is right? Like, how do I know which part of you is the real part that is actually responsible for making the decisions? Is it the narrative self? And so a lot of the problems that he'll talk about this, right, is like a fantastic experiment by Kahneman, where they'll ask, there's two groups of people.
It's Daniel Kahneman.
Okay. Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yep.
Two groups of people. There's people in two groups. The first group will be putting their hands in water at, 14 degrees Celsius. What is that? 50, probably 45 degrees. Okay. Okay. So the first group of people is putting their hands in 45 degrees Fahrenheit temperature water for 60 seconds. Second group of people put their hand in water at 45 degrees Fahrenheit for 60 seconds. But then, I think it's for 90 seconds, but the final 30 seconds, the water temperature is increased by 1 degree Fahrenheit or 1 degree Celsius or whatever. So it goes to 46. And then the best part, what they're asked is, okay, if you had to do this again, which one would you do? Right? So from a pure experience, right, 45 degrees Celsius water, the 45 degree Fahrenheit water is cold, right? Both experiences are awful. The second one is a longer time in cold water. Sure, like the water temperature increases, but like by a pretty insignificant amount, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's still, if you just sum up the experience, your experiencing body was suffering more in the second one, right? But it's around like 80 to 90% will say, I prefer the longer this thing. Just because the narrating self, the way it thinks about stuff is through the peak pain, right? Which is how the worst that you felt, and the end. Right, at the end of the experience, how did you feel? So the application for this is in a colonoscopy, right? Which is a pretty invasive procedure, right? You know what?
I would imagine so.
Right, yeah. So the question is, okay, how do you make it so that people feel less pain about it? And the way to do this is, a 5-minute colonoscopy versus a 10-minute colonoscopy. You would imagine that a 5-minute colonoscopy is probably like a better experience, right? Because it's just like less invasive.
Shorter, yeah.
Yeah, it's shorter because it's less intrusive. But as long as like the doctor in the middle makes you feel a little bit uneasy, but towards the end is like really slow and really calm, the narrating self will actually tell you that the 10 minutes one was a lot better. Because that's the way it calculates sensation and emotions and stuff like that. So take this to the voting booth, right? You could have like 3 years of god-awful experiences with the government, but right at the 4th year, suddenly taxes are gone, government spending's everywhere. Yeah. You're in the voting booth. What do you remember? The great campaign bus ad that you just saw, or the 3 years of like really bad?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's so the narrating self, that will is biochemical. It's pretty irrational. And more importantly, it can be gamed, right? In a certain sense, like now our
humans are now hackable.
Yeah.
That's something I really pulled from the book.
Yeah. And he relates this through the humanist agenda while tracing this religion. That's how he kind of arrives at this conclusion. They are hackable. The best example for this is the slew of medication that's just available, right? To make you feel a certain way or not a certain way. Which, again, like they're good things, right? A lot of this is like progress and a step in the right direction. I think there was an experiment in Israel that he'll cite about a person feeling, just clinically depressed, right? And the approach was to put a couple of sensors that kind of like prevent the communication between the part of the brain that feels that and cuts off the communication to the rest of the brain. What happened though, right? And it's a little chip that you put inside your brain. So he was feeling great. Now, a couple of months later, he came back. He's like, I feel worse than ever. They found out that the battery of that thing had just died, and that all they had to do was replace that back to normal completely. Yeah, it really, like, medical tech is incredible. But like, once you get into like these biochemical reactions are algorithmic, right? In that they are deterministic. You can put step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and kind of describe the flow of this, right? And a lot of these, like, so I'm reading Behave by Sapolsky right now, and a lot of these neurobiological experiments, what they do is they capture these like fundamentals. Um, I forget what they're called, but like whatever the MRI captures, right? Those, like, the flow of current in your brain that results in communication, and some other fundamentals about hormone and blood pressure, and they're able to predict what you're going to do with about an 80 to 90% accuracy before you actually do it.
Really?
Yeah. So a lot of this is like very algorithmic in nature these days, right? And so yeah, I mean, that's his point about the humanist agenda being gameable. So if we can design a better algorithm that makes more reliable decisions more consistently, that is truthful and correct, and not confounded by this like narrative, irrational sense of the experiences that you're making, why wouldn't our pursuit of that eventually replace this humanist religion that we have set ourselves?